What if I told you that while you were going about your life between 2010 and 2023, getting married, having kids, changing jobs, a serial killer was dumping bodies along a beach, calling victims' families to torture them, and then going home to his wife and children in the suburbs? Like nothing happened.
It's a terrifying thought, and for 13 years, it was a reality. That December 2010 search, it turned a serene stretch of Ocean Parkway, a beautiful, isolated highway on Long Island, into one of America's most disturbing and extensive crime scenes.
And it exposed a predator who was just hiding in plain sight for over a decade.
More than 13 years. And the craziest part is what started it all. The catalyst was Shannan Gilbert. She vanished after a frantic 911 call in May of 2010 from Oak Beach, Long Island.
Right, so the search was for her. Just for her.
Exactly. 7 months later, police were searching the thick cold brush for her. But instead, they found 4 sets of human remains wrapped tightly in burlap.
And none of them were Shannan.
None of them. This shocking initial find, it just blew the doors off the investigation. It eventually revealed 10 sets of remains along that isolated beach strip.
This case isn't just about a serial killer. I mean, it's about forgotten victims, a 13-year investigation that just seemed hopeless for so long.
And it's about how a seemingly ordinary family architect's minute digital footprint finally unraveled a carefully constructed, monstrous double life.
Welcome to Whispers of Crime.
Subscribe to Whispers of Crime on YouTube. Follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and other podcast platforms.
Okay, so to really understand this, we have to start with Shannan Gilbert. You said without her, this graveyard might still be a secret.
It absolutely might have. On May 1st, 2010, she was a 23-year-old working as an escort. The last time anyone saw her, she was running and screaming for help in this wealthy, private community of Oak Beach where she'd gone to meet a client.
And that 911 call, it's just chilling. It lasted for 23 minutes.
Oh.
What was she saying? What did it sound like?
It was pure terror. You can hear it in her voice. She's telling the dispatcher, they're going to kill me, over and over. She was apparently running from the client's house, just running through the neighborhood, knocking on doors, desperate for help.
So she's in a total panic.
Total panic. Her movements were erratic, which suggested, maybe drug use or just extreme fear or probably both. But the crucial detail is that right after that call ended, she vanished.
So 7 months later, they start looking for her and find the first 4 bodies. But when they do finally find Shannan's remains, a year later, in December 2011, there was this huge fight over how she died, wasn't there?
A huge conflict. The official police conclusion felt wrong to a lot of people, especially since there was clearly a serial killer operating just miles away.
What was their official story?
For years, the authorities maintained it was an unfortunate tragic accident. They found her skeleton in this remote marsh, and they argued she died from exposure, or maybe drowned in a drug-induced panic. They were adamant there was no evidence of foul play.
But her family never bought that for a second. I remember the pushback. They fought so hard.
They refused to accept it. Her family, with their attorney John Ray, they got the help of the renowned forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Baden.
The former New York City medical examiner. A big name.
A very big name. And Dr. Baden's independent findings were explosive. He looked at the evidence and concluded that Shannan's death was, and I'm quoting here, consistent with homicidal strangulation.
Okay, so what did he see that the official medical examiner missed? How could they be so far apart?
It all came down to a tiny U-shaped bone in the neck. It's called the hyoid bone. Dr. Baden explained that the science shows pretty much every woman who is strangled or hung breaks her hyoid bone.
And Shannan's was broken.
It was disfigured, but in 2 very unique ways. One end had this rough, unusual edge, and the middle had a clean hole right through the center, like it was drilled or hole punched.
A hole. That doesn't happen in an accidental drowning.
Not at all. Dr. Baden asserted that this detail, which points to massive force or some kind of unusual instrument, was just completely overlooked or dismissed by the Suffolk County ME. It confirms the darkest suspicion. Shannan Gilbert was murdered.
Which brings us to the man now charged, Rex Heuermann. Is there any direct link between him and Shannan's disappearance that night?
Well, he hasn't been charged in her death, but her family's attorney, John Ray, maintains he has uncorroborated witnesses who connect Heuermann to Oak Beach around the time Shannan disappeared.
What kind of witnesses?
For example, there's an affidavit from a sex worker. She claimed Heuermann convinced her to meet him at a motel. She fled in a panic, and a man fitting his description ran to a nearby van. The driver who picked her up, who she believes was Shannan Gilbert, knew that aggressive man was nearby. It suggests Heuermann was known in that community.
So it's possible he was the one Shannan was running from that night, and if so, the fact that police dismissed that connection for a decade is just a profound injustice.
It's a huge question hanging over the entire case.
Let's get to the Gilgo Four. This is where a missing person case becomes a full-blown serial killer investigation.
It is. In December of 2010, those first 4 bodies were discovered, all wrapped in burlap, all left along Ocean Parkway. They became known as the Gilgo Four.
And who were they?
Melissa Barthelemy, Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello all were in their 20s. All were sex workers who used Craigslist to meet clients. And investigators noted they all shared a specific physical profile. They were all petite.
It's heartbreaking. Their vulnerability was clearly exploited. But the thing that makes this case so bizarre, so cruel, are the taunting phone calls. Why? Why would a killer risk that?
It really speaks to a deep psychological need for control and sadism. It's what profilers call the killer's signature. It's not about the kill, it's about the power. In the case of Melissa Barthelemy, the killer used her own phone to call her sister.
Her own phone?
Her own phone. And in one of those calls, he just admitted it with the sickening certainty. He said, "I killed Melissa."
That's unbelievable. He's actively inserting himself into the family's grief. Where did they trace those calls?
And that tracing was maybe the single most crucial early clue. The calls came from 2 very different areas. One was busy Midtown Manhattan, right around Times Square. The other was a quiet residential area on Long Island. Massapequa. The tracing suggested the killer either lived or worked in both of those locations. And of course, we now know Rex Heuermann worked in Midtown Manhattan and lived in Massapequa Park.
So the taunts, the cruelty, it was also a mistake. He was leaving a map right to his doorstep.
He was. And the crime scene, you have to understand, it just kept expanding. In March and April of 2011, investigators found 6 more sets of remains.
6 more on top of the 4.
6 more, bringing the total to 10. This included partial remains of other victims, like Jessica Taylor and Valerie Mack, and also the unnamed bodies of an Asian male, a toddler, and another woman later identified as Karen Vergata.
Let's talk about Karen Vergata. She was Jane Doe No. 7 for so long. Her case seems to stretch this whole timeline even further back, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Her remains were found in 2 separate places, some near the Gilgo sites in 2011, but other partial remains were found all the way back in 1996 in the same general area. Her identification in 2023 just blew the timeline wide open.
And this is where that really strange story comes in, right? The swinger witness who claims she knew Heuermann back in the 90s.
Yes, her affidavit is, well, it's very relevant. She was a former swinger, and she described meeting Heuermann at a swapping club in Manhattan in the late 90s. She and her partner, who is an NYPD detective, eventually went back to Rex Heuermann's house in Massapequa Park.
To his house, with his family there.
We don't know if the family was there, but it was his home. The witness claims Heuermann went to another room with another girl, who she believes was Karen Vergata. And later, as they were leaving, they saw that same girl run out of the house naked.
Naked and running from his house in the middle of a suburb in 1996. That is a terrifying picture. It suggests he was doing this violence, right under everyone's noses for decades.
It supports the idea that his home wasn't just a home. It was a compartmentalized site for his dark activities.
And what about the other victims? The Asian male victim, what do we know about him?
His partial body was found in April 2011. He was estimated to be between 17 and 23 years old, about 5'6", and was believed to be a sex worker. Importantly, he was wearing women's clothing when he died, which investigators think happened sometime before 2006.
And the location where he was found is significant, right?
Very significant. He was found near Jones Beach and JFK Airport. And experts, retired police lieutenants, they've noted that the marshlands along Long Island's South Shore have been used as a dumping ground by organized crime for decades.
So it's a known spot.
It's a known spot. It has quick, anonymous access from the city. This raises the alarming possibility that Long Island wasn't just a hunting ground for one predator. It might have attracted multiple killers, all using the same isolation to their advantage.
So after these discoveries in 2010 and 2011, the case just goes cold. For years, 10 bodies, different timelines, different methods. It must have been overwhelming. What finally broke it open after 13 years?
It was stagnant. You had political turmoil, conflicting theories inside the department, and honestly, the technology just wasn't there yet to really exploit the early evidence. The big change was a new police commissioner in 2020 who formed a fresh, unified task force and just poured new resources into it.
So they went back to the old evidence with new tech. What was the breakthrough?
It was the cell records, specifically the data from the burner phones the killer used to contact the Gilgo Four. Back in 2012, they'd figured out that the signals from those phones always pinged off towers inside this tiny localized area of Massapequa Park.
They called it the box.
Exactly, the box, a few blocks in a quiet suburb. In 2020, the new task force realized that the killer had to be living inside that box. He was using those phones from his home base, so they cross-referenced every large man living in that box with vehicle records and other data.
And that's where the truck comes in.
That's where the truck comes in. The focus narrowed to a large man who owned a dark-colored Chevrolet Avalanche pickup. Rex Heuermann owned a dark green 2002 Chevy Avalanche. He was over 6 feet tall, imposing, and he lived right in the middle of the Massapequa box.
So once they put the man, the truck, and the box together, they had him.
They had their primary suspect, a 59-year-old Manhattan architect living what looked like a perfectly normal life.
This guy was so careful about leaving no trace, but he was creating this huge digital footprint. Tell us about the fake identities he built online.
It was a whole system. Investigators found 3 email accounts with fake names, all linked to burner numbers, names like John Springfield, Thomas Hawk. His Tinder account used the name Andrew Andy Roberts, and critically, Rex Heuermann's middle name is Andrew.
Wait, he linked one of the accounts to his credit card? He's using burner phones and fake emails, but then uses his real credit card? That seems sloppy.
It does. It suggests maybe his compartmentalization wasn't perfect, or that his compulsion just overrode his caution. For instance, one of his AOL addresses was linked to a burner phone, but a search of that email revealed selfies he'd taken and sent to people. He was putting his own face out there.
So the digital map he thought was untraceable actually led them right to him. But the arrest in July 2023, that needed more than just cell data. That needed DNA, right? How did they finally get a sample from him?
It was classic surveillance. Investigators followed him in Manhattan and collected his DNA from a single discarded pizza crust he threw in a trash can.
A pizza crust.
Pizza crust. They got his full DNA profile from it and then compared that to the trace evidence from the crime scenes.
And what did that comparison show? Because I know there were a couple of different kinds of DNA tests involved.
Right. And this is key to the strength of the case. First, they did what's called mitochondrial DNA analysis on a male hair found on the burlap wrapped around one victim. That kind of DNA is inherited from your mother, so it's not a one-to-one match, but it excluded 99.96% of the population. It was a very strong link.
But not definitive. So where did the slam dunk come from?
That came from the pizza crust. They used nuclear DNA profiling, which is the standard identification test. They compared that to a male hair found on the remains of Sandra Castilla. The result was, well, it was a scientific certainty. The odds were astronomical that it could be anyone else.
And once they had him, the charges just kept coming. It wasn't just the Gilgo Four anymore. The timeline of violence got so much longer.
It expanded dramatically. Initially, he was charged with the Gilgo Four, but in June of 2024, they added the murders of Sandra Castilla from 1993, Valerie Mack from 2000, and Jessica Taylor from 2003. So now he's charged with 7 murders spanning nearly 30 years.
30 years. Let's focus on Jessica Taylor. The evidence linking him to her is so specific, isn't it? It connects his digital life and his physical presence.
It does. Miss Taylor was last seen in Midtown Manhattan in July 2003. Her remains were found in Manorville, dismembered, and crucially, her distinctive tattoo had been obliterated. Investigators believe that was done specifically to stop her from being identified.
And they saw his truck near where her body was dumped.
Yes, a vehicle matching his dark-colored Avalanche was seen near the dump site about 13 hours before the remains were discovered.
But the digital evidence after that, that's maybe the most damning part.
It's his digital confession, in a way. Forensics showed that just days after her body was found, Heuermann looked up a Newsday article titled, "Cops Seek Help in IDing Manorville Body." And then he systematically deleted that search history.
So he's checking on his own crime and then trying to cover his tracks online. That is pure consciousness of guilt.
And it gets worse. The very next day, he started searching online for a new Chevrolet Avalanche, even though his was only a year old. And the ones he looked for were much brighter colors, blue, white. The inference is clear. He was worried his dark truck had been seen, and he wanted to change it.
The evidence is just overwhelming. It paints this picture of a methodical predator who used Long Island as his personal hunting ground for decades.
And the connection to Castilla and Mack is so important because it establishes this pattern of extreme mutilation, decapitation, dismemberment, removing tattoos very early in his alleged killing career. It wasn't just about killing, it was about degradation and destroying their identity.
Don't forget to subscribe to Whispers of Crime on YouTube and follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and all major podcast platforms. Like, share, and comment on this episode to help us reach more people who need to hear the Gilgo Beach murder story. Give us your positive review and rating about our podcast. I just keep coming back to the same question. How? How does a man live this kind of double life? He's an architect in Manhattan. He has a wife, 2 kids, a house in the suburbs. The level of compartmentalization is just mind-boggling.
It required supreme control and what seems to have been an environment of really deep generational dysfunction at home. Professionally, he was known as a smart, meticulous guy who was great at finding loopholes in building codes. And that professional life, being an architect of rules, it seems to directly mirror his criminal life as an architect of murder.
So you're saying he applied the same skills, the detailed planning, the process, finding the weaknesses in the system.
Yeah.
He used that for killing.
It really looks that way. Even childhood friends said he was always into power games, hunting, guns. He was this big guy who was bullied but didn't often fight back. It seems he channeled that need for control into these secret power fantasies, with the ultimate power being life and death.
But his wife, Asa Ellerup, and his children, how could they live in that house and miss everything? The secrets must have created just this environment of incredible trauma.
Well, the evidence suggests he was strategic. He created what you could call windows of opportunity, and he fostered this environment of normalized secrecy. We see it so clearly in the evidence around the Jessica Taylor murder in 2003.
What do you mean, hunting window?
His digital calendar, which they recovered from a hard drive, showed his wife and kids were almost always away during these crucial periods. The exact week that Jessica Taylor was murdered, his calendar for every single day was marked. Wife and VT at Smugs. He stayed home on Long Island. Alone.
So the family vacations were his cover. It was a strategic absence so he could have the freedom to do what he wanted. That's just a level of calculated betrayal I can't even process.
And the home itself reinforced that secrecy. People have described the house as having locked rooms where nobody asked questions about their father's activities. It was a learned behavior to just hide things, even from themselves.
And the true horror of that secret world was documented in his own words, the murder blueprint. That has to be one of those chilling pieces of evidence ever found in a serial killer case.
It's his confession of intent. The document was titled HK 2002-04. It was recovered from his basement hard drive. And this wasn't something he downloaded. It was a locally created draft, a personal checklist that he updated over years. It shows planning, execution, and self-review.
Let's talk about the problems section. It reads like a risk assessment for a building project, not a murder.
Exactly. Under problems, he listed things like DNA, tire marks, witness, and police stop. He was obsessed with eliminating trace evidence, and the supplies list was just cold. Booties, lye or acid, a police scanner, saws, hairnets, tarps, surgical preparation.
This wasn't impulsive. This was a procedure. And the prep list, it sounds like he was planning a very specific torture scenario.
That section is profoundly disturbing. It includes things like setup stage and references to a crossbar and a hard point. Investigators believe hard point refers to a fixed anchor point, maybe in the ceiling, that's used for sexual suspension bondage.
Which lines up with his internet searches, right?
Yeah.
The pornography he was looking at involved exactly that. Suspension, torture, mutilation.
It confirms the murder wasn't the goal. It was the climax of a meticulously planned playtime. But the truly horrifying part is the post-event analysis. The man was taking notes on how to be a better killer.
The body prep section.
Yeah.
You said it directly mirrors how victims like Jessica Taylor and Valerie Mack were found. What did he write?
The instructions were graphic, wash body, remove trace DNA, remove eye marks, and then remove head and hands, and remove marks from torture.
He wrote down the steps he took to mutilate them, to remove their tattoos and their extremities so they couldn't be identified. It's a direct link.
And the things to remember section shows this chilling self-critique. He wrote notes to himself to hit harder because it took too many hits to take down. He considered hitting the face or neck next time to do it faster.
And the rope. There was a note about the rope.
The most chilling line, perhaps. Use heavy rope for neck light rope. Broke under stress of being tight end.
So a rope broke while he was strangling someone. And his reaction was not horror, but a note to upgrade his equipment for the next murder. It's clinical. It's administrative evil.
He viewed human life as a technical problem to be optimized, and he was studying how to do it better. The document even had a notes section with references to the book Mindhunter by profiler John Douglas.
He was studying the profilers. He was learning from the people trying to catch him.
He was studying the enemy. He referenced specific pages that deal with different categories of killers. He was actively trying to understand his own profile, maybe even disguise it. He was the architect of his own criminal concealment system.
It's beyond comprehension.
Yeah.
The depth of the planning.
So as this massive case moves toward trial, one of the biggest legal battles is over the DNA evidence, specifically the DNA from his wife and daughter that was found on the victims.
Right. Hair from 2 of the Gilgo Four victims was linked to his family. What exactly did they find, and what does it mean?
A hair found on Maureen Brainerd Barnes was genetically linked to his wife, Asa Ellerup, and a hair found on Amber Costello was linked to his daughter, Victoria. And the match to the daughter was, the statistics are just staggering. It couldn't be anyone else.
So what is the prosecution saying? Are they trying to imply the family was involved?
No, they've been very clear about that. They are not accusing the family of participating. Their theory is that the DNA proves the victims were held or transported in an environment Heuermann controlled, like his house or his truck, where family hairs would just naturally be present. It's evidence that he brought the victims into a secret world.
But the defense is fighting to get that evidence thrown out. What's their argument?
They're arguing it's a novel science that isn't generally accepted in New York State, which has a very strict standard for evidence called the Fry standard. They argue that telling a jury the wife and daughter's DNA was on the bodies creates what's called an adverse inference.
Meaning the jury will just automatically assume they're guilty or that they knew something, even if they were completely innocent.
Exactly. It creates this powerful psychological bias. It becomes almost impossible for a juror to separate the passive transfer of DNA from the idea of complicity in the crime itself.
But the judge ruled against the defense, right? So the DNA is coming in, and all 7 murder charges will be tried at once.
Yes, those were 2 major victories for the prosecution. But the psychological toll on the family, regardless of the legal outcome, it's unimaginable.
Especially for his wife, Asa Ellerup. The reports about her have been heartbreaking.
The fallout has been immense. She has been described as physically deteriorating, which is often a sign of severe depression and psychological disorganization after a massive trauma. And she's exhibiting classic signs of trauma bonding.
Trauma bonding, where you stay loyal to your abuser even after you know the truth.
Yes. She's still visiting him in jail. She maintains this distorted kind of devotion. It's a very complex psychological web he wove over decades, and she's still trapped in it.
What about his daughter, Victoria? Is she reacting the same way?
Victoria seems to be showing the very first signs of breaking that bond. Psychologists have pointed out that she's started using the past tense when she talks about her father. She says things like, "I looked up to him," or "he was my hero." That shift is huge. It's the beginning of separating the father she thought she knew from the monster she discovered.
And Heuermann himself. He knows these jail calls are being recorded. Does he ever say he's innocent?
And that's maybe the most telling detail of all. In all the recorded calls, Heuermann never once proclaims his innocence. He never says it's all a mistake. He just talks about logistics. His refusal to deny the charges, even to the one person who still visits him, it really speaks volumes.
We have to clarify one last thing before we wrap up. With 10 bodies found, was Heuermann the only killer on Ocean Parkway?
No. And this is a critical point. DNA analysis has definitively excluded Rex Heuermann from the 1994 murder of another victim, Colleen McNamee. Her killer was another man, John Bittrolf, a carpenter who was already in prison for other murders.
So Long Island was, in fact, a hunting ground for multiple separate serial killers.
That is the ultimate terrifying truth here. The isolation of those beaches created a perfect dumping ground. The case didn't shrink to just one killer. The truth became sharper. Heuermann was allegedly responsible for a specific set of victims, but he was not alone out there.
So where does the trial stand now?
Rex Heuermann is charged with 7 murders. He's pleaded not guilty to all of them. The trial preparations are ongoing. It's expected to be a massive, massive evidentiary battle, all centered on that digital forensic trail and the complex familial DNA evidence.
And the original civil case for Shannan Gilbert, the one that started it all, that's still moving forward too.
That's right. Her family's attorney is still pursuing that case, and it's been critical in keeping the focus on how she really died and making sure she isn't forgotten in all of this.
This deep dive, it's such a horrifying story about how evil can hide behind this facade of normal suburban life. It is so important that we honor the victims: Maureen, Melissa, Megan, Amber, Sandra, Jessica, Valerie, Karen, and the others who still don't have a name. They were marginalized, they were forgotten for too long.
Their stories are a testament to the fact that persistence can eventually lead to justice, no matter how delayed it is. The science and the digital detective work that finally caught him proves that even decades of secrets can't hide forever. But the case also leaves us with a really important warning, especially when you look at the family.
What's the final lesson we should take from this deep dive into the architect of secrets?
The biggest warning is about normalizing secrecy and control in a relationship. Heuermann's alleged ability to plan torture while his family was away, the locked rooms, the financial secrets, that is a fundamentally toxic level of control. Dedication to someone shouldn't mean being blind to red flags. Love should never require you to deny reality.
So if you find yourself making excuses for unexplained absences or secret lives or just bizarre controlling behavior, those aren't just quirks.
They are critical warning signs that secrecy is being used as a weapon. The contrast between his wife's trauma bond and his daughter's slow move to acceptance is a roadmap. Denial only makes the trauma last longer.
That chilling lesson that the greatest monster can be living right next door or even in the basement right beneath you, that's the final haunting thought this case leaves us all with.
Don't forget to subscribe to Whispers of Crime on YouTube and follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and all major podcast platforms. Like, share, and comment on this episode to help us reach more people who need to hear the Gilgo Beach murder story. Give us your positive review and rating about our podcast.